Welcome to the Fantasy Champions Fantasy Football Podcast. Here's your host, Morgan Colby and Rick Lemon.
What's going on, Fantasy Champs? We are inching ever so closer to the NFL season. When you hear this, most likely it is exactly 21 days until the NFL season begins. My name is Morgan Colby. I got Rick Lemon with me as always. What's cracking?
What's up?
We are cruising. There's, for us, you know, after we record all these episodes, for us, there's going to be 2 weeks. 2 weeks until, 2 full off-season weeks until we start talking about week 1 trade targets. And Thursday night football previews and starts and sits. That's crazy.
That is crazy. We're almost back into football season, bro.
Yeah, I'm ready.
Me too.
I'm spending hours on Madden.
It's all right. I'm doing something worse.
What's that?
You're spending hours on Madden, and I'm spending too much money on best ball.
Yes. Yeah, that's not a
Dude,
good
like
idea.
almost like once every day I'm doing like a best ball draft just for fun. And I'm like, I gotta stop.
Yeah.
This is getting out of hand.
I think I've done like 2.
I think I've probably done like 30.
Just take as many shots as you want.
Exactly.
But anyway, so we got some good content to get to this week. We have top 5 breakouts at the quarterback / tight end position, or not top 5, but just the top breakouts that we think at quarterback and tight end. We usually cram those together because there's not a lot individually. Next year, hopefully, there's a lot more. We have top riskiest running backs. So we're doing our top riskiest running backs and wide receivers in 2 consecutive shows. I almost literally started talking about risky players for this episode, so I need to remember that we're talking about breakouts and not risky players. But anyway, and then on Friday we have Thursday, Friday, Saturday, whatever day you're listening is mock draft.
Yes, sir.
So that'll be interesting where we mock draft together. But anyway, so today we are going to talk about breakouts at the quarterback and tight end position. It should be interesting. Before we jump into that, check out our website, fantasychampions.com. Follow us on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, all of the good platforms. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, and other podcasting platforms, please leave a review. Share this pod with your friends. If you're watching on YouTube, subscribe. Click the bell for notifications, like, and comment down below any questions you may have. So going through this is actually pretty interesting because we don't really have any quarterbacks. Usually from year to year, there's some younger quarterbacks going into their second year that you can peg as a breakout. And the same thing for tight end, second, third year. This year, I just feel like there was a drought last year, which there was, at the quarterback position. So there's 2 rookie quarterbacks from last year, not 2 rookies anymore, but second-year quarterbacks. Kenny Pickett, Desmond Ridder, who are not on this list because I think they suck. Actually, I like Kenny Pickett. I've been I'm not gonna lie, snagging him in some 15th rounds.
Yeah, he's
a stash, maybe, in case
could be a
stash.
Out. Yeah.
He's got a little rushing floor, but I don't know. He reminds me of Ryan Tannehill. Remember when Tannehill was good at quarterback?
Yeah, that's a great comp. Yeah.
So I don't know what's going to happen for the Steelers, but if he ends up being really good this year, that could be good. So there's just not a lot of quarterbacks available to say for breakout. Tight ends is kind of the same thing. So, we have some obvious guys and then we have some not so obvious guys. But let's get into breakout quarterbacks and tight ends. Let's start with the quarterback position. Number 1 is T-Law, Trevor Lawrence. And you're probably like, well, he already broke out. Whatever, dude. He was a QB7 last year. Is that really breaking out?
Both these quarterbacks are debatable about actually breaking out or not, but there's really no standout, clear breakout candidates at quarterback. So these 2 guys are definitely.
I would say
there.
Trevor Lawrence really does fit the mold, though, because he was QB8 last year. So he was good for fantasy football, but he wasn't winning you weeks, really.
Right.
There were some 30-point games in there, but just going through his week-to-week totals, From week 1 to week 17, he had 14, 18, 25, 6, 12, 24, 18, 8, 16, 21, 24, 16, 33, 27, 18, 5, and 10. So there's probably 5 or 6 games where he had over 20 points in that stretch of games. He averaged 17.9 fantasy points per game. I think for Trevor Lawrence, like, he did this with Christian Kirk as his number 1 wide receiver and Zay Jones as his number 2.
Mm-hmm.
And they go out and they get Calvin Ridley. They put him on this team. They retain Evan Engram, who I think was good for last year, and they still have Christian Kirk. So I think all of those things kind of combined with a slightly improved offensive line and a good running game that you're probably going to get out of, the tandem of Travis Etienne and Tank Bigsby is going to end up, accelerating Trevor Lawrence into a higher position. Because I think if you had a comp of a quarterback for fantasy football that you had to make of Trevor Lawrence, it would probably be Joe Burrow for fantasy football purposes. And
yeah, I think he runs more than Burrow, though.
I agree. But for him to ascend for me into the top 5 conversation at the quarterback position this year, he's going to have to throw a lot of touchdowns and he's going to have to put up a lot of yards. And I think with the decisions that the Jaguars made this year, a second year in this offense that they put together last year, I think it all comes to a head here this year. And makes Trevor Lawrence a breakout right now. He is going off the board, I think, is the 7th, 8th or 9th quarterback off the board. So you can probably snag Trevor Lawrence. Is he going in the 6th?
Well, it depends on the format, but yeah, around there.
Yeah. So like after Justin Herbert goes, in between Herbert and he's kind of in the tier of his own after Herbert and with Dak Prescott and Deshaun Watson. So you can definitely get Trevor Lawrence. And I think, what you see is what you get. I don't think last year was a breakout because I think there were a lot of games where he lost you a game. There's a lot of weeks where he just got 14, 15 points, which was not enough to win you a week, but it didn't really kill you. And he wasn't really good enough to start on a week-to-week basis. I'm assuming there are probably people who did start him on a week-to-week basis, but I think
I had to.
What did you say you had to?
Yeah.
Hell. But no, for what you get from Trevor Lawrence here, he's probably going to have a good stretch of games where he's more like a Joe Burrow, where he gets 20 points a week and then provides you with that, 30-plus point game, 3, 4, 5 times on the year. So that's what you want from Trevor Lawrence as a breakout. You want him to get past the Kirk Cousins and the Geno Smiths of the world and jump up into that top 5 and produce more consistently. So that's kind of what I see from him, and that's why I think he's a breakout.
Yeah, I would say he had it was kind of a breakout last year because he just proved that he was an actually good NFL quarterback after his rookie season. Yeah. And he definitely had great moments, and you could have started him week to week. I did, and I was mostly fine at quarterback. There was a week or a couple, though, that he just didn't perform to the level that I wanted him to. He was more like you start him on a good matchup, and then on a bad matchup, you could stream him, which is kind of that Kirk Cousins sort of vibe. And we both think that he will take another step from that. So that's kind of what makes him a breakout, is because he's going to take another step forward past that tier of what he was in last year. And he, of all I've talked about the top 8 quarterbacks this year.
Yeah.
He's the clear 8th guy in drafts. Sometimes he's even 9th. So to me, the value is there as well for a guy who I think could win MVP. That's his ceiling to me. He's in a team that has a pretty easy schedule. Second year in that offense with Doug Peterson. Mm-hmm. You get Calvin Ridley, which is similar to the Diggs getting or Josh Allen getting Diggs. But hopefully, we'll get to him. But DJ Moore and Fields, you're hoping it's sort of like that next bump in the guy's career.
Yeah.
Thanks to having a star receiver. So he's got a lot of things going for him, and he was already pretty good last year. Mm-hmm. I easily think he can get to at least close to Burrow's level passing, just about there, and then maybe add a little more rushing, and all of a sudden he's at the same level as a guy like Joe Burrow.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean,
for fantasy, of course.
Right, for fantasy, because I don't think they play the same at all.
No.
But yeah, T-Law, definitely a breakout. Number 2 on our list here is Justin Jefferson.
Who?
Justin Fields. I popped on Twitter for 2 seconds and I saw a video of Justin Jefferson, and that was in my brain.
It's like, man, he's a real breakout quarterback. He's never even played it.
No, Justin Fields. Now, this one is a little bit closer and harder. Last year we had him as a breakout, and I would consider that as a win, as a like a correct choice for us.
Right.
But I still think he has more breaking out to do for fantasy 100%. Football. Because last year, the start of the season, 14, 9, 6, 10, 17, 19 fantasy points, right? That stretch from weeks 1 to week 6, he was okay. He had some okay games in there, 17, 19. It was good. From that point on, 24, 26, 42, 40, 23. He was off week 12. I think he got injured or missed that game. But 21, a bye week, 23, 9, and then 17, and did not play week 18. So from in that stretch of time, from week 7 to week 18, Justin Fields was a top 5 quarterback. And if we just take week 18 out because he didn't play it, Justin Fields is a number 2 quarterback in fantasy football in that stretch. He has a chance at, like Rick's talking about Trevor Lawrence MVP. I'm talking about Justin Fields, number 1 quarterback in fantasy type stuff.
Whoa.
If he passes the ball effectively this year, and I don't take any stock in a preseason game, but it was kind of fun watching weapons do what they do and Justin Fields not having to do anything really but dump it off. But like it was literally the same play too, which is hilarious. It was just they changed the person that was running it. It was DJ Moore, and then it was Khalil Herbert, and it was the same screenplay. But anyway, if Fields takes a step forward, right, in the passing game, because we know what he is as a rusher, we know what he can do as a rusher. Like, you just throw on Justin Fields highlights from last year, and you'll see what this guy is capable of as a rushing quarterback. Last year he had 1,000 rushing yards on 160 attempts, an average of 7.1 yards attempt. That was, I think that's higher than Lamar Jackson's was his first year. That could be wrong, but like just some of the stuff that I saw from him, like everyone was like, "Oh, Lamar Jackson's definitely the number 1 rushing quarterback in the league," and then I was like, "Yeah, but he might be faster and more elusive." But some of the things that Justin Fields does, and some of the ways that he can get out of a sack, I was just like, how does this guy do this? 12 guys would just be barreling down towards him, or 6 guys, and then 2 of them would have their hands on him. He'd spin out of it, get out, and then run 60 yards for a touchdown. And it was like, what just happened? Like, this drive was dead for the Bears, and all of a sudden they scored a touchdown. So anyway, passing-wise, though, he was not great. 60% completion percentage, not good. 2,200 yards, not really good. He did have 17 passing touchdowns, which is okay, but he also had 11 interceptions. So, I mean, you want to see some of this move up into a positive direction. He only had 318 pass attempts. So, all of that, I think, is going to increase this year. Like, he's going to have more passing yards. He's going to have more passing touchdowns. If he's around 24 to 25 passing touchdowns and like 3,700 passing yards, he was already QB6 last year.
Right.
Those numbers, just based on rough math, would push Justin Fields from QB6 all the way up into the top 3. And so,
how many touchdowns did you say for passing?
24, 25.
Yeah.
So it would push him all the way up into the top 3. And, obviously he missed some time last year. He did not play in 2 games. So, his numbers would have been even better. I don't think he would have reached Joe Burrow, but, you're just talking about in a full season, Justin Fields probably could have gotten to the top 3 last year if he played that. And he had the early season where they didn't really know what they were doing, and they couldn't get the offense going and all of that stuff. So Justin Fields, definitely a breakout to me, and I think it's because I think he can ascend into a larger, you talk about these rushing quarterbacks like Jalen Hurts. Jalen Hurts, from the year that we say he broke out when he was QB 6, 7, or 8 to last year where he jumped into the top 3 and was winning people leagues, and he even missed 2 weeks. I think he probably would have been QB 2, and he was on pace to be the QB 1 in fantasy football last year until, really week 16, 17, and 18. Fields is going to jump into that conversation to me. So that's why I have him as a breakout. Like, he hasn't fully broken out yet. QB 6 is great, but we want to see him do it.
Sleeper says QB 7.
Sleeper does?
Yeah.
Oh, that might be different. What league you looking at?
Oh, well, that could be it.
5 6 point touchdown leagues are different.
Yeah, true.
Anyway, yeah. So my long monologue about my favorite player in the NFL is over.
Yeah, I mean, it's all the points you said I think are valid. I want to kind of dive into that more with Hurts, that comparison, because that's where I was going to go with it. And Hurts year 2, 16 touchdowns, 9 interceptions, 3,100 yards, and had great rushing numbers. They're kind of comparable seasons. Fields threw less yards and less passing attempts, but he did have 1 more touchdown, 2 more interceptions, and obviously insane rushing numbers. So their numbers passing the ball, though, weren't that far off from each other, but the jump Hurts took from year 2 to year 3 was huge. He had way more touchdowns, he had less interceptions, he had more yards, and his rushing was still the same. He actually had more rushing touchdowns, but yards was pretty much still the same. So it feels it does something like that. You brought up like 24 to 25 touchdowns. Hurts only had 22 last year, and he was the QB3. And I think he was like, QB2 in points per game or QB1 in points per game? Yeah. So if Fields can get to that kind of level, that 22 to 25 touchdown passes, and just throw a lot. He needs more yards, though. That's a big one. Only 2,200 yards. More passing attempts. And then his rushing stays the same. And Hurts is like, I think Hurts has a better team than Fields. DJ Moore is definitely a huge acquisition. And we talk about these young quarterbacks getting those star receivers like Trevor Lawrence, like Josh Allen did in the past, like Jalen Hurts did last year. And Fields fits that mold. I think Devontae Smith, though, and A.J. Brown is a much better duo than DJ Moore and Darnell Mooney. But it's still a lot better than what he had last year, and it's still a big upgrade. So you add all that in, I could easily see Fields having the type of jump that Jalen Hurts did. And that would be considered a true breakout because he would be a top 3 fantasy quarterback if that happens. And he did kind of break out last year, but there's a lot of people that aren't sold on him. A lot of people. I mean, you go on Twitter and you'll see like these main accounts, mainstream accounts post like quarterback rankings. All the comments are saying Justin Fields sucks. He's not a good player. Why is he this high? Why is he higher than this guy? Why is he higher than that guy? He's not even that good. So there's a lot of people who are out on Fields, but I think this year he has a real chance to prove those people wrong, and they're going to be talking about him like they talked about Jalen Hurts, or at least close to that next season.
Yeah. I mean, those are all fair points. Jalen Hurts, too, by the way. He was a QB1 from week 1 to 15 before he missed the last 3 games and had that 9-point game in week 18 before they sat him. So, like, to me, you're just looking at what he was able to do and like the numbers for, Justin Fields. Like, he had a lot of like sub 20-point games last year. Hurts 24, 34, 27, 17, 27, 16, 28, 20, 22, 24, 29, 34, 30, 36. So like that's what I'm anticipating from Justin Fields. But we'll see.
Right.
It's so funny you talked about Justin Fields getting DJ Moore. I didn't even think about it because I just assumed Justin Fields.
Right. And not to mention the fact that it's his second year in the system. It's now his 3rd year in the league. Yep. Should have a breakout anyway, regardless of
our third quarterback, Mac Jones. Just kidding. Just kidding.
Yeah, well.
All right, let's talk about some tight ends really quickly. This was even grosser. There's really, to me, personally, there's only one guy that I really, really like for fantasy football at the tight end position this year that I think could have a real breakout. And to be honest with you, we haven't really seen this other guy. I'm gonna change it, and you let me know. I'm gonna change it in the show notes, and you let me know if this is a good idea or not. But because he hasn't really had a breakout yet.
Okay.
Does that count?
Well, I don't know if that does count.
Dang it.
I mean, hold on, let me look.
All right, you look. I'll talk about Freiermuth.
I mean, I don't know if that counts.
So, anyway, no, I like Pat Freiermuth a lot. I think he's become one of my favorite tight ends. He had a couple of interesting seasons in fantasy football, and there's some positive things to look at for Pat Freiermuth. I'm trying to pull up his numbers here. Just give me 1 second. So yeah, this is his third year in the league, correct?
Yes, he's the same draft as Kyle Pitts. He was the second tight end off.
Oh, that's right. So in 2021, he had 79 targets, 60 catches with Ben Roethlisberger. Was it Ben Roethlisberger? Oh, yeah, I think it was. And 7 touchdowns. Last year, he had an efficiency bump and a target increase. So he had 98 targets last year, 63 catches, 732 yards, 2 touchdowns. So he went from 7 touchdowns to 2 touchdowns. I would imagine that if the offense is slightly more efficient this year, right, that the touchdowns will increase because, he averaged basically the same amount of fantasy points per game, and had a yards per reception increase of about 4.3 yards or 3.3 yards per reception. So, and he had a way more air yards, like 849 air yards in 2022, 348 in 2021. So they were throwing it to him through the air a little bit more. And I think all of these things, if the offense for the Steelers improves and Kenny Pickett ends up being like at least a middling quarterback in the NFL, I think Freiermuth could see a bump and that he could have a really, really good season. Last year, he ended up finishing in PPR leagues, he finished as the tight end 7 with 148 fantasy points, and that was with 2 total touchdowns on the year. So for me, when you get past like tight end 6, everyone's kind of the same. Like all the way down to tight end 12. These are the tight ends after Pat Freiermuth at tight end 7 with 148 fantasy points. You had Cole Kmet with 147. You had Taysom Hill with 145. You had Dalton Schultz with 142. You had David Njoku with 142. Dallas Goedert with 141. You had Gerald Everett at 13 with 139. So it was like
they're all the same.
They're all essentially they are literally within 10 points of each other going all the way to tight end 13. They're all the same. So to me, I was going to say Kyle Pitts. Pat Freiermuth is has not broken out yet. And despite the fact that he was tight end 7 and was one of the best tight ends in fantasy football last year, he's kind of in that similar spot where you saw TJ Hawkinson in previous years. Freiermuth now, to me, can make that leap. Hawkinson in PPR this year was the tight end 2 in fantasy football. I think he can jump up into that top 5. And if he starts scoring touchdowns and gets slightly more targets, you're going to see some positive things for Pat Freiermuth in fantasy football. The other thing is there's a lot going on for the Pittsburgh Steelers offensively. They have George Pickens, who people love, but I have my concerns. Like I like George Pickens, and I think there's some positive things. Like he makes these ridiculous catches.
Yeah,
and
he's clearly talented.
But I was listening to the Reception Perception podcast with Matt Harmon, and he was talking specifically about George Pickens, and he said, for wide receivers in fantasy football, you either have both of these two things. You either have the insane ability to separate off the line of scrimmage, which most top end wide receivers do. And if you don't have that ability, you have some other ridiculous trait that helps you overcome the fact that you can't separate. Every time I watch George Pickens play, he cannot separate off the line of scrimmage. Makes ridiculous catches, but cannot separate. So is him making ridiculous catches enough for him to ascend into this stratosphere of being one of the top 10, 12 wide receivers in the NFL, which some people think he can break out into? Or is he just a wide receiver that can't separate, that makes ridiculous catches, i.e., as a New England Patriots fan, Devontae Parker.
So it's kind of a gross comparison.
Not to talk about George Pickens in the tight end segment,
right? Not talking about George Pickens for too long, but I was literally going to say his comp to me is kind of like Devontae Parker.
Yeah,
he's the traditional X receiver that's not like an insane route runner or insane at creating separation.
Yeah,
but you throw it up to him one-on-one, he's going to come down with it most of the time.
Yeah.
And Freiermuth, like he's very solid. I'm still drafting him a lot. I think he's in that range between like Njoku and Evan Ingram and Freiermuth. And of those three guys, I like Freiermuth the most. And I definitely could see a breakout. Kenny Pickett last year just wasn't good passing the ball, and neither was Mitch Trubisky. So you expect even just a slight increase, as you said, for Kenny Pickett this year. Would it therefore increase Freiermuth's stats? Like if he just does what he did last year and gets more than 2 touchdowns, he's gonna have a really good year. That's basically the simple way of putting it, but it's true because the target share will be there most likely. The catches will be there. And then if Pickett, who threw 7 touchdowns last year, throws like 20 this year, then Freiermuth is probably going to get like at least probably like 5 or 6 of those, and makes him a top, at least like probably like top 7 tight end.
Yeah, and I think the thing for me too is we talk about on this show for the last couple of years when we're picking breakout tight ends, a lot of it obviously comes down to eye test, talent, all of that stuff, but we also use kind of this formula where we try to figure out where on the target tree he is on the football team. Is he the 4th or 5th guy where you think he might break out, but he really can't because he's the 4th or 5th target on the team? Some guy's got to go ahead of him and get fed. So to me, like the Steelers have 2 targets, and that's George Pickens,
Deontay,
and it's Deontay Johnson. And Deontay Johnson has bricks for hands and gets hurt a lot. And George Pickens
he didn't have any drops last year.
He did not have any drops last year. Yeah, that's fair. But anyway, sorry, Deontay. I did you dirty. He's a fine player.
So this is where we get to my problem with Freiermuth and why I'm a little concerned of his ceiling is because of he is the 3rd guy, I think, in that offense. And is Kenny Pickett going to be good enough to support Freiermuth as the 3rd guy? I don't know.
Yeah.
I think somebody in that Steelers offense that people are excited about is going to take a hit. Whether it's Deontay Johnson, George Pickens, Freiermuth, or Najee, I don't think all those guys eat unless Kenny Pickett has a really good year. I think somebody's going to disappoint somebody.
I think more than likely to me it's going to be George Pickens.
I agree.
So
I do agree.
But I do think the big thing for me is Freiermuth has a floor. And we know what that floor is.
Yeah.
And it's probably 7 or 8. And if he starts catching touchdowns and gets the same workload that he got last year, which I think is going to increase, but even if just assume he gets the same workload and he catches 3 more passing touchdowns, all of a sudden he's number 4.
Right.
In fantasy football at the tight end position. So
yeah.
He could jump up. I think he's a breakout. I think he's really good. That's the one guy like I've been targeting a little bit later in drafts. So if you're, hot tip, go get Pat Freiermuth in drafts. Second guy is a little bit more of a deeper play. A guy that I think could break out and jump into where Freiermuth is right now. So between 7 and 10, that people start looking at as a more legitimate, breakout. And it's Chig Okonkwo. I'm not like uber duper excited about him. And last year he had 97 fantasy points, finished as a tight end 25. So not great. But
he was a rookie.
But he was a rookie, and there was a stretch at the end of the season where he kind of started playing a little bit more effectively. Week 13 he had 10 points. Week 12 he had 10 points. Week 13 he had 13 points. Week 14 he had 10. Then he had 2, 5, and then he had 13. So I'm actually curious. Week 13 through 18, he was the tight end 7 in fantasy football. So to me, there's some interesting stuff about Chig Okonkwo, and he also happens to be really fast for a tight end. I want to see if they have the 40 time here. He ran a 4.52. So I'm trying to think of a comparable slow butt running back that did that last year. Ramondre Stevenson runs a 4.55.
Yeah, that's interesting.
So Chig's fast for a tight end. Usually those guys are not that quick. He's 243, 6'2", does all those good things. But you want to see an increase in target share. I think he is definitely at this point the number one tight end on their depth chart.
100%.
Yeah, because there's literally...
They had Hooper last year, and which is something that I think to keep note. And Hooper had like 50 targets, and he's not there anymore. So
yeah, their second tight end right now is Josh Weil, and their
Hooper
third
had
tight
60
end is
targets
Justin
last
Riggs.
year.
So the big thing for me with Chig here is that he's the tight end one. First off, how many vacated targets do they have at the tight end position with Hooper?
Well, Hooper had 60, so that's that. And they are in the top 10 in the league in vacated targets. They are 9th in the NFL in vacated targets. Now, most of that's going to go to D-Hop. I think that's fair to say.
Yeah, but
it's 199 vacated targets.
Yes, that's a lot.
That's a lot.
So the big thing for me, just quickly on Chig, is that like this football team, they signed DeAndre Hopkins, so obviously he's there and he's going to have to get his target share, but he's also old and he really hasn't gotten hurt yet. And those two things at the wide receiver position usually don't go hand in hand at an old age. Also, the Titans have had this long history of taking old wide receivers and just burying them right into the ground. Randy Moss, Julio Jones, now DeAndre Hopkins maybe. I don't know. But anyway. And then you have Treylon Burks, who happened to get hurt today in practice. He popped his hamstring, which is horrible for wide receivers. So
I mean, by the time this show comes out, do we know that's what happened?
Yeah, they said it was. I mean, I think it was a hamstring, but just if it changes,
because this says left knee.
Oh, that's even worse.
So I mean, we don't. Or by the time we're recording this, so we're recording this the day it happened. So we really don't know. But if he's actually injured, Chig,
he becomes the number 2 target on the football team.
Yeah.
So this is a deeper play, and he is getting drafted, but there's a possibility that he can jump from tight end 25, obviously, to a higher realm into the top 10 or into the top 7 in fantasy football and surprise a lot of people. So it's a deeper breakout. But I think there's a lot of positive things for Chig.
Yeah, agreed. And especially if Burks is out, which I hope he's not. But if he is and misses significant time, Chig, I think, has a really good shot to have a big breakout season.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, agreed.
The stars align.
Yeah, if the stars align. That same stretch of games, by the way, I wanted to give some numbers. He was only on pace for 71 targets. He had 58 catches, 595 yards, and 7 touchdowns over that stretch. So it was a lot of touchdowns. If he gets into the 100 targets conversation and catches about 75% of his passes, he could get.
Well, then that's
you're talking about 75 catches, probably somewhere in the ballpark of like 800 yards and maybe 5 touchdowns on the season, which is a pretty good year in fantasy football for a tight end. So
yeah.
I like Chig for those reasons. Final guy that we're going to talk about is Dallas Goedert. We know what Goedert is. He's had good years in the past, but just looking back, I don't think he has been. The last time he was,
he's a tight end 10 once in his career.
Yeah, so like for me, I kind of just assumed that Dallas Goedert was good already.
Has already had a breakout year, basically.
Yeah, and like to me, he really hasn't had that breakout year. He's had some really good stretches of games. Like this year, he averaged 11.8 fantasy points per game, which would have made him the tight end 5 if he stayed healthy. But he missed 5 weeks. He's on.
Well, he's just been injured his whole career except his rookie season,
which doesn't make me very positive.
Right, but it's not like he's missing like last year he missed 5 games, but the year before that he missed 2.
Yeah.
Then he missed 5 games again. So I mean but then the year before that he missed 1. So it's like he hasn't had any like crazy injuries. It's more like he'll get injured and miss like a couple weeks, and then he's not a top 5 tight end because of that.
Yeah, I think my main like if I had to pick one main concern for him, it's not necessarily injury. It's the fact that this football team throws it 536 times. They have Devonta Smith and A.J. Brown, who they have to throw the ball to. Now, that didn't stop them last year, from targeting. Yeah, targeting. Why am I forgetting his name? Freaking Dallas Goedert. But he was on pace for 97 targets. 97, 98 targets last year. So, if he cracks, 100, we're same conversation that we had before, but a lot more efficient than Chig because it's one of the better offenses in football. So you'll definitely see the finally breakout for Dallas Goedert. Like he's never really been a top 5 tight end, but he's had sections of seasons where he's been a top 5 tight end. What we're looking for is consistency over the whole season and doing it for the entire time, which I think he can do.
Mm-hmm.
So
no, I agree. I mean, and that's the thing. If he just stays healthy, and he's getting drafted as I think it depends on the format, but there's most formats he's like kind of like the quarterback. So I say there's like the big 8, right? It's kind of similar with the tight ends. It's Kelsey, it's Andrews, it's Hawkinson, it's Kittle, it's Pitts, and it's Waller, right? Those are your first 6 off the board usually. And Goddard, to me, should probably be in that tier of guys. Not the very top, but like he should be in that grouping. And he's the last tight end off the board. He's the tight end 7. So that's also decent value. He's not like a sexy name or anything like that, or he's kind of somebody you're like, ugh, like I guess I'll take Dallas Goedert. I could use a tight end. But he's pretty solid. He's been solid in the past. Last year, he was top 5 in points per game. And I don't really see the offense changing at all. I mean, it is a little concerning that he's the 3rd target on a team that doesn't throw the ball a lot. But they're also one of the best teams in the league, and they're very, very efficient. So, and I don't think that's probably going to change this year. I don't really think much changes for the Eagles offense. They didn't make any big changes outside of running back. But A.J. Brown, Devonta Smith, Dallas Goedert is probably your top 3 with Jalen Hurts at quarterback. So I'm still fine with Goddard. He just has a ceiling. Like I don't think he's going to be a top 3 tight end probably with A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith there. But I feel like he's a lock to finally have his quote-unquote breakout season and be like a top 6 or 7 tight end, maybe even top 5.
Yeah, I agree. All right. You got anything else to say on these boys?
No, I hate quarterbacks and tight ends.
Oh my God, I do too. It's important, but like there's usually not a lot of breakouts, so take it for what it is.
I feel like this year especially.
Oh my gosh, I know. Trevor Lawrence, Justin Fields at the quarterback position, Freiermuth, Okonkwo, and Goddard at the tight end position. Get those guys on your team. They're going to break out. We'll see you later, guys.
See you.
Thank you for listening to the Fantasy Champions Podcast. Make sure you subscribe on iTunes and YouTube and follow us on Twitter @TheFFChamps.